Welcome to Cherish Ephesians 6:4. The title of this article is I Hate Being Told I'm a Bad Person. So this is another objection to the Bible and Christianity that I'm trying to speak to a little bit. And this article is for a person who's searching online for answers, or the person who received this article is because someone who cares about you sent it to you. So thanks for taking the time to think about this, and let's move on. There have probably been countless times through the centuries where a person who represented Christianity began to tell a person about Jesus and the cross with the lead line something like, "You're a bad person and you're going to hell." And maybe they didn't say it quite that way, but that was the gist of it. It was as if they wanted to scare you or shock you into wanting to hear more. However, it isn't just the one-on-one conversations that have gone that way. Commonly called hellfire and brimstone preaching, many preachers or teachers of the Bible have stood in front of large gatherings and shouted a message declaring the imminent danger of hell for the person who has disobeyed God and rejected his plan to be reconciled to him. I must admit that even as a Christian, I'm bothered when somebody thinks that way about me. Why is being told you're a bad person so offensive? So think with me through a few responses I have heard. First, some people hate any messages that are perceived to be negative and just want to hear and think about things that are positive. Some people completely reject a message that says God will punish a person by sending him to a terrible place for not obeying him, and don't believe a loving God would do such a thing. Some people believe that all people are basically good. However, they do bad things at times because they've been victims of being treated poorly by others in the past, or grew up in some sort of a difficult environment. And then some people immediately dismiss the idea of them being a bad person because they measure their own behavior against other people in the world who are quote-unquote really bad people. In fact, most people think they are good. The fact of the matter is, no one likes to be told they are a bad person, especially when it hasn't been explained what we even mean when we use the term bad to define a person. And if we don't explain this more fully, it is likely to be a message that is hated by everyone, even people who are Christians. Let me illustrate the problem. A number of years ago, I would meet with a group of men once a week in the early hours to talk about things the Bible taught. The Bible has a lot to say about how we think and behave as people, and part of that is significant teaching and explanation about our nature and its tendency to be disobedient to people and to God. Of course, the Bible uses the term sin for disobedience, and the more we talked about sin, the more discouraged one of the men in my group became. As we talked, he began to think deeply about his own actions in life and the thoughts that would often come into his mind. He quickly realized that his ungodly actions and thoughts far outweighed thought and actions that were aligned with God, and was greatly convicted about his sin. This conviction made him feel very bad inside, and he became quite discouraged. He decided he needed a break from our meetings, and when I realized what was happening to him, I went to him and stressed that he was getting beaten down by a focus on only one part of the biblical message. This is what happens when we don't hear the entire story. The first part of the story is, yes, you may be compared to other people and think that you're good, but compared to God, you do and think many bad things, that is sin, and in that way, you are a bad person. You see, God demands that we obey him perfectly. He is the standard, not what I may think or how I compare to other people. In his mind, there are no good people, as all people fall short of the mark of perfection that he demands. In that way, every one of us is quote-unquote bad. With that in mind, can we take a moment for an honest assessment of our own lives? Can we put everything else aside and take a look at our behavior and, even more importantly, our thoughts? Are we always loving and kind, looking to serve others, never becoming angry, always forgiving, always submitting to authorities and parents? Have you ever lied or stolen something? And who or what is the most important thing in the world to you? Is it not true that the way you think about everything you do in your life is in the context of how you will benefit from it? Don't you sometimes manipulate or mislead people to get what you want? How often do you have thoughts of lust or become jealous or covet what other people have that you don't? And are you thankful for things in your life, or are you a complainer? This short list of questions above should be enough to give you a perspective of how, quote-unquote, good you are in God's eyes. And sadly, this is not something we grow into, but it is the way it is with all people right from the beginning of our lives. Just think of the precious baby who was told not to put their fingers into the light socket. They check and see if the parent is watching them, and as soon as they think they can get away with it, they immediately attempt to do exactly what they were told not to do. And this doesn't change into adulthood, and if we admit it, we don't really want to obey anything anyone tells us to do. In fact, sometimes we not only don't want to submit to authority, but we actually think about how we can rebel against it. This is the plight of every human being, and this type of disobedient or rebellious attitude is not only toward other people, but is also how we think about submission to God. So is this what some Christians are talking about when they tell people that they're bad? Yes, this is where they're getting that idea from, but they're expressing it in a very incomplete way. Going back to my friend in the Bible study, he needed to hear the complete message because there is an incredibly positive and loving counter to the, quote, "you're a bad person" declaration, unquote. And here it is. God has made a way for him to look at you and not see you as a bad or a sinful person, but instead see you as a person with perfect thoughts and perfect behavior. Now, how is that possible? It is possible because God understands how impossible it is for us to stop behaving the way we behave and ever get to the point where we would be good enough to be reconciled to him and become part of his family. He knows that we can't stop doing the things we do, nor can we escape from him rightfully punishing us for all of our disobedience. Therefore, he took it upon himself to send his Son, Jesus Christ, to come to earth as a man and live the perfect life on our behalf. And once Jesus had completed his time of living a perfect life, he voluntarily offered himself to be the one who would receive all the punishment for our disobedience. This is the rest of the story. The first part of the story is completely negative and should make us feel bad about ourselves. But the second part of the story is incredibly positive and should fill us with joy. You see, we really can't deny that we have disobeyed God's rules for us, and in that way, we are, quote-unquote, bad people. For that, we deserve his wrath. But we also can't deny that God has lovingly and graciously designed a way of escape, and how foolish would it be for us to ignore him? To learn more, I have 3 suggestions for you. Maybe you don't think God even exists, so I would like you to listen to another message called Does God Exist? And you can click on that in the article if you're reading the article, or if you're on YouTube, you can see the location of that message in the description. And I have 2 other suggestions for you. Both of those locations for recordings are in the article or in the description on YouTube. If you're a person who's beginning to think more deeply about this, I'm suggesting a message called Ultimate Questions. And if you would like to go straight to the Bible to understand what exactly Jesus Christ did for you, I direct you to the recordings on the book of John. Again, all of the links are in the description section. I hope this was helpful, and I'm grateful for you listening in. you can certainly write to me if you have any questions. It's Mike at CherishEphesians64.com. Thanks so much.